Hockey video games have been a big part of growing up for many fans, and it all started back in the 80s with classics like ice hockey on the Atari, Blades of Steel, and ice hockey on the NES. And who can forget NHL 94, which many still consider the best hockey game ever. We've also had other hit games like Wayne Gretzky's 3D Hockey on the N64, and NHL hits on the PS2 and the original Xbox. But in the last decade or so, EA Sports has pretty much taken over the hockey video game scene. And every year they put a game out, they just seem to feel more and more disconnected with their fans. Back in the early 90s, Electronic Arts was just starting to make a name for itself in the sports industry. They had some success with John Madden Football, but the big goal was to become a go-to for fans of all major sports: football, baseball, basketball, soccer, and hockey. In 1991, EA took a shot at the hockey market with the release of NHL Hockey on the Sega Genesis. It was the first NHL video game to feature licensed teams and players. The game got a good reception overall, but it was clear this was just the beginning of something bigger. The following year, NHLPA Hockey 93 came out with added features like fighting, and fans absolutely loved it. The improved gameplay showed everyone that EA was serious about taking the NHL series to new heights, and they had no idea just how big the next game would be for them. In the fall of 1993, EA Sports dropped NHL 94 for the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, and it introduced a game changer that would take hockey video games to a whole new level. For the first time ever, players could use a one-timer to try and beat the goalie. This move helped shoot the series up the popularity charts. The new one-timer mechanic completely changed the game, making it way more exciting. Before NHL 94, scoring was pretty tough in the earlier versions, with most games ending in low scores like 1-0 or 2-1. But with the one-timer, you could have games with scores like 5-4 or 6-5, making it a lot more fun to play. They also threw in some cool extras like breaking the glass, a regular season mode, shootouts, and the playoffs. NHL 94 blew up so much that fans still keep it alive today with yearly graphic and roster updates on NHL94.com. And it's not the only version of the series that gets that kind of love, but we'll get into that later. IGN even named it one of the greatest games of all time. After NHL 94 did so well, EA Sports kept the momentum going into each new release, making the series better with upgraded modes, graphics, and gameplay. With other games like ESPN NHL Hockey, Brett Hull Hockey, and NHL Breakaway trying to compete, EA had every reason to keep stepping up their game. And NHL 95 was just that. It was a game changer, adding a full season mode along with player creation, editing, trading, and signing. For the first time, fans could create their own player and hit the ice with their favorite NHL stars. They also tweaked the gameplay with drop passes, fake shots, and the ability to block shots. NHL 96 brought back the fighting feature and added more realistic penalties like double minors and majors. The PC version even introduced multiple camera angles, blending 2D sprints with a 3D environment for the first time in the series. By the time NHL 97 rolled around, EA Sports was facing more serious competition, with games like NHL Face-Off and NHL Powerplay in the mix. To stay ahead, they stepped it up by using a full 3D engine and motion-captured players, giving the game a fresh look. Plus, they brought in Jim Hewson, the voice of Hockey Night in Canada, to do the play-by-play.
Tonight from New England, we present the NHL exhibition game between the St. Louis Blues and the Hartford Whalers.
The NHL series kept getting better, especially as competitors like NHL Breakaway and NHL Hits came and went without making much of a dent in the market. EA Sports had a very solid run of releases, but it was the game that dropped in the fall of 2003 that really got everyone talking. NHL 2004 was a game changer for the franchise. It wasn't just another hockey game, it was the one that took the series to a whole new level. Along with adding 3 new leagues, the game added improved gameplay and modes, making it not just the best hockey game out, but also the best sports game of the year. They nailed the puck control, they nailed the skating and the checking mechanics, and off the ice they introduced a Dynasty mode, a revamped franchise mode where you could upgrade your arena, manage your staff, scout players, and have complete control over your franchise. NHL 2004 was so well loved that, like NHL 94, it still gets yearly updates. The community even took it further with NHL 2004 Rebuilt, which includes updated scoreboards, logos, jerseys, player faces, arenas, and more. There's even an online league where fans can compete. So despite how big NHL 2004 was, another game tried to steal the spotlight after the series hit a bit of a rough patch in the mid-2000s. After the massive success of 2004, EA Sports tried to keep the momentum going with NHL 2005, but it just didn't click with the players. The game didn't offer much in terms of new features, and the changes that were made seemed to hurt the experience more than help it. Fans weren't very impressed, and the feedback was pretty negative. And that's just the nature with games that have yearly releases. You overdo yourself one year, and the next year is gonna look like a failure. And it didn't help them that at the same time, 2K Sports came out swinging with NHL 2K5, priced at just $20, which was a steal compared to EA's $60 game. Plus, with the NHL season on hold due to the lockout, people were more likely to go for the cheaper option. As a result, NHL 2005 struggled, selling only 680,000 copies, while 2K doubled that with about 1.3 million units sold of NHL 2K5. But it didn't take long for them to bounce back in a huge way. And that was with the release of NHL 07 on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. This game brought updated graphics, revamped presentations, and all put together with the iconic commentary from Gary Thorne and Bill Clement. But what really set apart NHL 07 was the introduction of the skill stick. Instead of just pushing buttons to shoot, players could now control their stick movements with the analog stick, making a much more realistic gameplay experience. EA really built on this momentum, going into NHL 08, adding more deeks, allowing players to get more creative. And then in NHL 09, EA introduced Be a Pro. This mode let you take a player from minor leagues all the way up to being an NHL superstar. Then NHL 10 introduced the EA Sports Hockey League, where you could team up with friends and compete against other squads online. The additions from NHL 07 to NHL 10 really helped push EA Sports NHL to new heights, and sales went through the roof while competitors struggled to keep up. And eventually, 2K had to wave the white flag and bow out of the hockey scene because trying to compete with EA was more trouble than it was worth, and this left EA as the sole hockey game on consoles. This helped EA tremendously. And when NHL 13 dropped in 2012, it broke opening week records by selling almost 500,000 copies right out the gate. And this hype led directly into next year's release, which what some call the last best game of the NHL series, NHL 14. NHL 14, where do I even begin? The nostalgia this game brings is unmatched. For many, it's a favorite in the NHL series, but not because of the groundbreaking innovations. The game itself wasn't revolutionary in terms of new modes or features, but what made it stand out was the community around it. YouTubers like 2BC, Bacon Country, Don't Be Sod, Bojoco, and Bones on Demand introduced me to NHL gaming, and that was absolutely peak content. Don't get me wrong, today's chill YouTubers are great, but something just feels missing, and much of that stems from the rapid decline in EA's NHL games. The switch to new gen, which was Xbox 360 to Xbox One or PS3 to PS4, could not have gone any worse for EA. The first game on new gen was NHL 15, released in September of 2014, and oh my god, what a dumpster fire it was.
Was NHL 15 as bad as we remember?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Maybe worse.
Maybe worse.
It's almost like EA released an unfinished product. This game was missing so many game modes that players were left wondering if they accidentally bought the demo version. And if you don't remember or never played NHL 15, let me list all the features that were in NHL 14 but were missing from NHL 15 on the new gen consoles. And for a company with the motto, "It's in the game," there was a hell of a lot that was not in the game. There was no GM connected, no online team play, no EASHL, no online shootouts. There was no Live the Life or Be a Legend mode, and the Winter Classic, tournaments, and Battle for the Cup were all gone. Season mode was limited to Be a GM, which only allowed players to take control of NHL teams. Custom music support and the Create a Play designer and the ability to customize each team's AI was not available, and there was no Create a Team option or the ability to edit individual players. Practice mode was reduced to just one skater versus one AI goalie, and in terms of gameplay, there was no custom camera option, no action tracker replay highlights, and no top 3 stars at the end of the game. In Be a GM mode, the yearly draft was fully automated by the CPU, AHL games for your franchise could not be played, and players sent down to the minors didn't even accumulate stats. The fantasy draft option and preseason games were also just straight up removed for no reason. Then Be a Pro mode lacked the ability to simulate to your next shift, making you literally sit on the bench watching EA's awful AI try and play hockey. Be A Pro Limited played to just the NHL with no AHL, and removed the Memorial Cup, requiring you to either pick an NHL team or let the CPU draft you randomly. For Hockey Ultimate Team, you couldn't play against friends and there was no tournaments. But they sure as hell allowed you to buy packs. It was clear that EA wasn't ready to make the switch over to the new generations of consoles. Even though every one of their sports games had already made the switch a year prior, NHL was the last sports game from EA to make the switch, and this was because EA's team was laser focused on delivering the greatest hockey experiment to date on the Xbox 360 and PS3, which to be fair they did accomplish with NHL 14, but it seemed as though they put all their focus into NHL 14, then forgot they had to make another game the next year. And since then, it seems as though every single release disappoints the NHL community even more than the last one did. There are a few diamonds in the rough, or maybe just polished pebbles, but NHL 19 can actually be looked at with fond memories. It was the game that introduced us to the now familiar world of Chell. This included game modes like Ones, which was a 1v1v1 tournament, and then they added a bunch of new outdoor rinks. You could customize your player with a new outfit. The game just felt fresh and gave fans new things to obsess over. Moving from there hasn't really been a game in the NHL series that made fans feel that way. It seems every year, EA just focuses on the wrong things and makes meaningless additions to the game, showing how disconnected they are with the community they're actually selling to. And that especially shows with this year's release of NHL 25. The one thing that NHL fans have been begging for ever since the switch to new gen is a connected franchise mode. And we actually thought we were going to get it this year. Over the summer, EA released College Football 25, the first college football game since College Football 14. And in the new release, there is a connected Dynasty mode, allowing 32 different people to play together in one league. This excited NHL fans because for the longest time, it seemed as though EA was trying to work on a way to get connected franchise into the game again. And with it being added to College Football 25, hopes were very high for NHL 25. But the last thing you want to do with EA is get your hopes high because they never deliver. But don't worry, because one thing they did add was a new way to play Hockey Ultimate Team, which just so happens to be their most profitable part of the game. EA added a new way to play HUT in NHL 25, which will probably just get more people to spend more money on the game. Just like when they added the Battle Pass in the shop into World of Chell in NHL 24. Why was that needed? They couldn't even come up with a creative name, they just nabbed it from Fortnite. And that's where you can see where the priority is for EA, making money. And you can't really blame them because they are a business after all, but it's just the complete disrespect that gets people annoyed. I'm going to show you the opening scenes from every Be A Pro from the last 5 years.
Taylor Mackey joins us here on the line, who represents the hottest, most anticipated prospect in years. Taylor, give us some 411 on the kid here.
Hey, morning, James. Well, look, you may not believe this, but the kid's up here on Carter Lake.
What?
Playing pickup, yeah.
It's essentially the same exact thing. Be A Pro has not been touched once since NHL 21, and that's just sort of the disrespect I'm talking about, neglecting a single game mode that was huge in NHL 14, and then they neglect it for 5 years. So it's clear that EA is just trying to scrape every last dollar out of their NHL fan base. They just don't care, it's that simple. The soundtrack is awful every year, some aspects of the game haven't been updated in over a decade, and they constantly add things that break the game and take away things that shouldn't have been messed with at all. Last year they took away the long flip and limiting it to pretty much just a high chip. And you know it's bad when the thing people are most excited for in your new game is moving the scoreboard back to the top of the screen. But even with all these complaints, we still buy the game every single year. And that's because there's no alternative. Ever since 2K stepped away from the NHL scene, it seems like the franchise has just been going downhill with every single release. And I'm sure EA isn't trying to make a bad game, they just don't have the pressure to deliver every year like they did back when 2K was a thing. Hopefully NHL 25 changes my mind about the state of the franchise, but for now, all I can expect is more disappointment from the greediest company on Earth.
EA Sports. It's in the game.